an academic. It's very difficult to deal with Vollmann, you know, in toto. So I think one of the things I like, for example, let me recommend something right here. I really liked your opening discussion of the opening passage of You Brighten Risen Angels. You know, Vollmann's work, for all the vast amounts of words that he's published over the years, he's also, believe it or not, a very careful writer in his own way. And I think his work, you know, deserves or requires this type of close analysis. So that opening about the origin myths, I thought was very effective. Just a couple other quick things. Joshua, one of the things that you raised in your paper, of course, right in the very beginning, is that point again, that Vollmann is dealing not only with political issues, but also philosophical issues and even spiritual issues. You know, one other, again, pardon me for being a little incoherent, but that's what happens when you get to be my age. You began by saying that despite something to the effect that despite the attention to Vollmann as an adventurer and his well-deserved association with sex and drugs and so forth and so on, well, yeah, maybe that's another problem we've got, is that has sort of obscured the real issues that Vollmann is dealing with. I would say that I don't know of any other writer that's been dealing so consistently with spiritual issues. That's another aspect of Vollmann's work that I think needs to be looked at in more detail. For all the luridness of the sort of settings of Vollmann's works, I always describe Bill as being kind of crazily idealistic, maybe masochistically so. Now, another just one obvious point I think to make is to sort of tie this back into the beginning essay here by Mike Hemmingson about Vollmann's endnotes. Well, first of all, that's a subject that needs to be looked at more carefully. Michael began this with this presentation today, but there's a lot of interesting stuff in those endnotes. And the way that they function in terms of their relationship to the main text, the way they kind of literalize a kind of author-text relationship that, say, the metafictionists were implying back in the 60s and 70s. You know, I remember coming back from China in 1989 and having a series of, was it phone conversations, possibly? Or maybe it was just correspondence, I know it was before email, with Brian McHale about the fact that when I got back to the United States in 1989, there was writers like Vollmann and David Foster Wallace that were, and Brian McHale, where suddenly the footnotes began to expand rapidly. And the obvious point would be because of computers, because it was so much easier to write footnotes. And I think Vollmann, you know, Vollmann was a computer programmer. Vollmann was really aware of the opportunities that technology involved, where you could just put a footnote and press the command, and there you are at the bottom of the page, rather than, well, I won't go into the history of the typewriter and how difficult it used to be to make footnotes. Finally, Michael alluded a couple of different times to the amusing, entertaining, and humorous nature of a lot of Vollmann's footnotes. And that's another subject that if I was a young scholar, I think I would focus on. That is, it's so rarely talked about with Bill Vollmann. It's a little like what happens with Bruce Springsteen in a way. That is, Vollmann is a very funny writer as well, and that a lot of his material that I think is treated too seriously, that even the humor and the sort of self-deprecation that fits in with his massive ego, these kind of contradictions which grind against one another. At any rate, Bill's, the humor in Bill's work is something I don't think, it's a little bit like Kathy Acker. I'll just put that in too. All right, so I've rambled on enough here. I'd like to have some time here for a question and answer session. And I also I forgot to mention to thank Daniel for putting this together. I hope this is the first of many Vollmann panels. So, Brian.
Yeah, I also want to thank all of you. And again, I was shocked to discover this is the first. If that's true, it's shocking to me after such a long body of work after so many years. So I want to thank you guys for the ground you're laying. A couple things touch on different things toward a question, I guess, for all of you. I think the obsession that some of you touched on about talking about the writer's life in the case of Vollmann in ways that the writer's life does not get talked about by many writers now since the 60s, 70s, when we talk about the author a lot, right? We were told we weren't supposed to really anymore. Vollmann still does, and I think that, along with the obsession about the length of the books and the effluvia or whatever, are more a function of lazy reviewers than of legitimate scholars. So I think you guys, any of that work that you're doing where you're moving away from those things as the things to talk about Vollmann, instead looking more closely at his moral vision or power. And so I think that's work that's really important to do. So I want to encourage you to do that. And we don't need to keep talking about the length of his books. I mean, Proust, Balzac, Dickens, come on. This doesn't need to be brought up every time. It's just a function of laziness.
We also need more women.
Yeah.
There's only 2 women in here out of like 18 people, the typical thing.
Yeah.
I know Bill would agree with that if he was here, so I just wanted to mention that.
So that's just something as thinking forward about how to continue to talk about Vollmann, that we should get past Emily and all these things. But a question I have for all of you, and some of you touched on indirectly, but to me one of the things that's peculiar about Vollmann, and I really don't know where to position him. Here's what your individual thoughts. I guess would be for all of you. I have a real hard time trying to understand him, where to place him politically, or if there is a place to put him politically, because of the subject matters you write about in Seven Dreams and Europe Central and so much of this other stuff is, you would expect him to have a more sort of classically sort of leftist position or tone through his texts, given the subject matter you're talking about, sort of the bloody origins of American expansionism or World War II, these other things, but he comes across in a very different way that positions his politics, somewhere outside of or different from the left-right way that we tend to talk about our authors. I'm curious what you see as his sort of political vision. If that doesn't
probably his attitude towards money, I think, maybe, sort of an indication. I don't know, I would say Vollmann is probably act like a Democrat, think like a Republican. Is that right? He's a fiscal conservative, and he's a fan of going back.
I guess it's a question for everyone.
Yeah, that's a good question. I don't.
He was not a fan of George Bush.
Yeah, that's what I was
either one, but
writing toward everywhere. Yeah, he talks about George Bush as a war criminal, essentially. But I think you have to take him topic by topic. You're right. You can't box him in because here's somebody who's so idealistic, which you would normally associate with liberalism, but yet he has his longest work is about when it's okay to use violence. It's not a very we associate with liberal sensibility. And the quote that I had from the interviewer where he talks about, as soon as you think you know something, you're sort of boxing yourself in. I think that's how we have to approach each topic that we would, look at it fresh with him. And you're right, you really can't be categorized because he takes everything on a case-by-case basis. And so in questioning what his political stance is, we probably have to take each, one by one and see where he would stand there.
Well, he does like his guns.
Yeah.
yeah, it is contradictory, but I think really what Joshua was just saying, case by case, because in all instances, what Bill is saying is we need to look at this as thoroughly and specifically as we can. We can't just be approaching topics but based on ideology or abstractions. So it's field evidence. It's what's the actual situation. So he's been critical about the communists. He's critical about he's certainly critical about all totalitarian systems of ideology. But I think absolutely on a case by case, he does like his guns. He does argue that there are times when it is permissible to kill other people, to be violent. But in general, he's more left, I would say.
I think, I'm interested actually in what you said about needing more women. I didn't get any abstracts from women for this panel. And I think one of the, I'm interested in sort of gender and masculinity. And one of the things that interests me is the sort of problematic sexual politics of Vollmann. It seems to me that is also represented, one of the difficulties in him sort of being accepted by a mainstream and critical audience it's not necessarily politically correct. And I was interested in Michael's comment about the testosterone novel. I'm just wondering, is a man's writer, a guy's writer in some way. And is that, in a sense, problematic?
Not with his recent book, The Kissing the Mask, where he dressed in drag, yeah. But he's been dressing in drag for a while.
There's a famous scene in the ice shirt that's him dressed in drag. Well, I mean, certainly, you know, as we all know, the elephant in the room is Bill's massive. He's certainly the greatest writer of all times about prostitutes, and his the fact that he frequents prostitutes and that he's written a lot about prostitutes is something that makes him problematic, I think, for men and women, I think, sometimes. But even with that, I mean, his arguments about that really relate to issues of power. His arguments about prostitutes is that I think the main point about prostitutes is that they're people, and that you need to look at them like people rather than just as prostitutes. So that whole gesture in the Rainbow Stories of writing those chapters about skinheads and about prostitutes and about street alcoholics, not in basically attempting to open a window in people's lives that aren't normally considered to be people. So I hope sometime we can get beyond that, because in his, say, the royal family it's about prostitutes, but it's also about the Buddha, quite seriously. It's about selflessness and finding something. So that is a problem, though, and I think it's a little like, you know, same thing with Pynchon in a different way. I mean, Pynchon is seen as a man's writer. Hemingway, certainly. But I think that's like everything else. If you're just categorizing things on some easy generalities, that you're not doing justice to the topic.
I think the toughest test case of the person that's hard to see as a person on their own terms is the Dan Smoot character in Royal Family. Vollmann's like incredibly sympathetic towards someone who it's very hard to have sympathy for someone.
Oh, the pedophile thing.
Yeah.
Right.
And I don't know that. I mean, I think that was where I hit my limit with following him,
Yeah,
I think maybe I went a little farther than some other readers might, but it was remarkably unsettling, and I don't know. I'd be curious if you have thoughts about sort of how much he expects his audience to come along. I mean, how cognizant is he, sort of, maybe not composing, but once something's out there and people are asking him questions about it, about the way that some of our discomfort might be good for us, or
You know, this is absolutely, what was the phrase that you used, Josh? I wrote it down here. Having something empathy.
I think it might have been yours there. Where
it was in Chris's paper.
Empathy
Right.
being the supreme principle of human relations.
Right.
I've heard Vollmann described as empathetic to a fault, which kind of goes to what you're saying. Yeah. There's somewhere where he talks about Hitler and how much he liked animals, and they said, well, just because we know he likes animals doesn't make him any less evil, but it helps us understand that he's still a human being, you know, in some way. And I think that's the sort of manifestation of that kind of empathy, or trying to understand the complete person rather than just the dominant aspect of them, maybe.
See, I remember the interview, the first interview I did with him back in 1990, with him talking about his experience with the skinheads in San Francisco and their attitudes, you know, highly racist, offensive attitudes. And I remember what Bill said was that something to the effect that if you don't realize that you could have been one of the Nazi guards in Dachau under different circumstances, it's important for everybody to realize that circumstances, you know, create people, social forces create people, various things. And again, it is a radical gesture, though. In all of Bill's works, I think, has been involved in that. A lot of the subject matter has been asking people to look at people and I guess basically understand how they got to be the way that they did.